But between us today, we're discussing Bob Jones martial arts, which is an Australian style, for Australians, taught by Australians for self-defence in Australia.
Hello guys, my name is Matthew Ball. We're celebrating 50 years of Bob Jones martial arts and Zen Do Kai, and with me today I have the two founding Sokes, Soke Bob Jones and Soke Richard Norton. Welcome gentlemen.
Thank you Matthew, good to be here with you.
We're going to do today is just an easy discussion between friends with the two Sokes, getting us going on some easy topics and conversation. So I'm going to open it up by asking about a really brief history of how you started Soke Bob and what got you into the martial arts and your first little part.
Let's see, you're going back 65 years. I had a rather large bouncing organisation, a couple hundred bouncers working for me doing clubs, doormen, crowd controllers. And we kept hearing about this guy called Jack Rosinski, who was a brown belt. We didn't know what a brown belt was, but it must be high up the chain because he's supposed to be so good.
Yep.
So we went down to East St Kilda Post Office, which was in the centre of the St Kilda Junction, and we watched one of his classes, and I said to all my big burly Maori bouncers, God, if we could use that stuff, we could beat an army. So we signed up that night, you know, because he had amazing kicks. We did about 3 months with him, and we realised we were all starting to kick everybody. Maori bouncers weighed 120 kilos. And they developed good kicks because it was better when you grabbed people up and walked them out, not kicking them in the guts. So
I can't say.
Then we heard about Tino Soberano, who was his claim to fame was he was a 50-50 hand and leg fighter.
Yep.
So this guy's 100% leg fighter, let's go and have a look at Tino. Well, that was the end of my Taekwondo era. The moment I saw Goju Ryu from Japan with Tino Soberano, and months later I met Sal Ibanez, so another doorway opened up. Yeah. But just with Tino alone was so spectacular. The night I saw him put on a show for us, because I took about a dozen bouncers there who were big burly guys who were just watching, not to infringe on training with him until we worked out what we wanted to do. But he had a bunch of all kinds of guys around him, bodybuilders and boxers and stuff, and he just played with them all.
Yeah, right.
Because everything was so good. His timing, his balance, everything was so good. So we went, okay, let's change camps, this is where it's at, this is better for our security work, the way he's training these people. So to me, unknowingly, they eventually became my red, yellow and blue, which I created in some time in the future, mixing the three colours together. Understanding martial arts had physical, spiritual and mental strengths. So Jack Rosinski was my mental strength, my physical strength, sorry. Jack Rosinski was my physical strength. He could make you do 100 push-ups, he could make you do 1,000 kicks, he could make... He just went on and on and on with endurance for fitness and positive mind, how to come back even if you're wounded or if you're hurt, how to keep coming back. Great attitude. Jack Rosinski taught me a great attitude. Then I went to Tino and Tino said indirectly, there's a smarter way. You can block softly and you can counter-strike hard. So that's a bit easier, maybe, not so enduring on the body. Then Sal Ibanez came along 3 months later, and later on, 30 years later I would meet David Brown, but in the very early stages I'd already met him through Sal Ibanez, because he said to me one day, you'll be a really nice guy one day as a martial artist when you stop fighting. I looked at him, but it was a definite message there that he felt I was fighting when the fight wasn't needed. Yep. And he said, to fight when the fight is needed, you can't be beaten. But when you start fighting just for the sake of fighting, because you're learning new tricks and stuff, because we used to have a Tino Soberano trick of the week. Tino Soberano unknowingly used to take his classes, and I sat there and I'd take all my bouncers down and I'd say, whatever he does today is his favourite technique, because you always had one. This is my favourite technique. And it'd be something from one of the forms that he'd worked out 3 ways to defend yourself. So we said, whatever he shows tonight, that's all we can do. Whatever the fight situation is, you can only do that technique that he showed us tonight. So that made the next night bouncing all over Melbourne. Whatever happens, you can only use those techniques he showed us today, which was 3 variations to this sort of movements with the sweep coming as you spin around. And
so it was Soke Richard, were you at Tino's at that time when the chief came down with the guys?
Well, my intro to Tino, I was doing judo. I always mention I started when I was like 11 years of age, but it was a friend that was at judo class with me and went to the same high school because I was only 16. And he mentioned, there's a karate school opening up in Bayswater, which is about 3 miles from where we lived. And so we didn't know what it was, who it was, because again, you got to remember back then, probably judo was the most predominantly known martial art. I'm sure there was karate around, as you know, Bob said, with Jack Rosinski, but it wasn't like mainstream. So it was pretty new. Yeah, so I went to this demonstration that Tina was putting on. He'd only been in the country, I think, 6 months. And it was just amazing. And I think you'd agree, Bob, but I think what makes it more amazing, because it was so new for us, you know, to see somebody shaping up the way they did and all these techniques. Obviously now a lot of the mysticism is taken out of martial arts.
There wasn't a dozen clubs in the whole of Victoria.
No, exactly.
Tina was one of them, and there was 10 other clubs.
Yeah, right.
We hadn't started yet. With the hundreds of clubs. You know, he's discussing now at the very beginning, the grassroots.
Yeah. And I used to, then I'd train a baseball and get on my motorbike and ride down to Canterbury. And of course, again, you can imagine for me going to Canterbury with a young him and a young Mike Costello and people like this, you're like, okay, all right,
He was young.
It's going to be interesting.
We were in our mid-20s.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important point that people mightn't have reflected on. They know that there's an age difference, but in those early days, you know, at that time, that age difference
When you're
was
15,
a more prominent
when you're
age
15
difference.
and you train with a bunch of 25-year-old bouncers and knock-around guys who run slide grogs on the side, and we were doing it all in those days. Not crime, but dangerous way of living.
Not what, sorry?
Some of my best friends did that.
Not us.
Yeah.
No, but it's true. I was just a kid,
Yep.
you know, and but I got to tell you, what an amazing training ground for me to be introduced to. Not only are we training with someone like Tino and of course later Sal with their incredible ability, but you've also got these guys. There's a kid I'm looking at that already been doing security for X amount of years, had all the street experience, so you couldn't really have had a better mixture in order to get into an almost, I don't mean in a bad way, in a combat mindset, you know. You had some great mentors, you know, in that whole mix in those early days of Canterbury.
Yeah,
Right?
it's the same for me because he was 15. I watched him grow up for 5 years.
Yeah.
All these gradings, going through all these colour belts. I went for black belt a bit early because I was older, Tino picked him little bounces and stuff.
Yep.
But I watched him coming up behind me and I went, holy shit, he's getting better. But he's not that skinny ass batty kid anymore. He's developing this frame, you know, already when he was 16, 17, 18. So it was both. Who was chasing who, you know?
My first tournament, in fact, I was in one of the first Australian championships, you know. I think it was a green belt, and I still remember fighting Mike Costello.
Yeah.
And in those days, you know, a lot of them like to grab the gi.
I remember.
You grab the gi like this and then just boom. I remember Mike punched me in the chest because I was moving around and throwing all the shit around. He's probably thought, stuff this. And he grabbed me, hit me, and I flew across the floor. And of course, then you just got a warning. And this was before protective equipment or anything. And they say it's a non-contact, but I got news for you. And I remember coming back and I'm wheezing. Of course, that was the end of it.
You wouldn't pay points if you didn't knock him down. They had to go down to get a Ippon, I think they called him, Ippon, Wazari.
Because you remember that the whole style of Tino, which is also very different, is if you swept somebody down, you didn't stop. It was about continuity. You do whatever you did to supposedly bring that fight to an end. So because it's only later I'm getting onto a whole different track that I did a little bit of sparring with Max Fabris and a few of them. This is after we were at, you know, with Zen Do Kai, and they wanted to put the gloves on. Max and Tom Curtis. I remember sparring with them, but they couldn't handle it. Not because they weren't really good, but they used to and stopping, whereas I was like, keep going. and you know, it's a whole different impression. And I remember at the time saying, wow, I mean, we really learnt the good style of sparring then, you know, with taking it through to an ending rather than the theoretical one killer punch and then stopping, which is more about the sport.
That's my first night when he sat around us in a circle. We were sitting on the side watching the class because we weren't sure if we were going to change from Jack because we loved Jack. You know? We didn't know there was any love affair coming that night because he did these guys one at a time. It was like they'd been picked out for it. There was a boxer, there was a bodybuilder, there was a grappler, there was whatever that was there. He just kept changing his position by shaping the forward foot towards him, and it was their turn next. They'd all gulp and get up and go because it was to impress us. I think that's what it was all about. And of course we were joined.
Our best memory of Tina back then was the glasses. That if you accidentally hit him or something, wouldn't it? You'd be, oh, sensei, sorry, but glasses would go. Remember, he dropped back into cat stance, and you'd always cop it. But it was an interesting lesson because his methodology was, well, if you accidentally hit me, what are you going to do to a smaller, weaker, lower rank? So you would always cop one, but it was always a little smile, the glasses would go up, and you'd be like, oh shit, here we go.
I'd like to jump us forward a bit to when you've already opened up, you've amalgamated the styles, started, and you're creating the first Hombu. How was that period? Was it exciting or daunting, or how was the feel of the people around you that you were getting in? So you'd really started to...
It was the most exciting feeling I couldn't even begin to explain. Tino had offered me a black belt when I was a brown belt to go to Tasmania. I couldn't wait to get home to tell my beautiful wife, we're on our way to Tassie. We're on our way to where? I said, I'll get my black belt if I go to Tassie. You'll get your black belt if you go to Tassie. You've been waiting 4.5 years. Well, all of a sudden. So I went and had to tell Tino the bad news. There's no way my wife wants to go to Hobart, Tasmania, you know.
Was she higher ranked than you?
Well, yes,
They all are.
Yeah,
about the same rank as Judy.
yeah, exactly.
About the same rank as Kyle. I was in the offering of Tasmania.
Yep.
6 months later, I do the black belt grading. He tells us we have to wait a week, 7 days before we get the message. 7 days later, he starts to ask us questions like, why do you want your black belt? I said, well, you know, you and Sal are my heroes, and I've got to get off door work. My marriage is not going to last. If I stay on door work, coming home at 5 and 6 a.m. in the morning, blood all over me and stuff half the time. Wasn't going over well on the home front, and now my daughter's been born. So I was looking for somebody to change my lifestyle. I want to learn to teach like you guys. I've been teaching since I was a green belt. Actually, before I was green belt. I was teaching Wall and McLean's Judo Club then in Paran and getting huge classes. I was a popular teacher because of my bouncing repertoire, you know. People flock to the clubs when you'd meet people all night in nightclubs. Where do you train? So I teach. Paran Judo Club. It was packed. And all the money was going back to headquarters. So at this point he says, well, I've just passed through to Japan, you can't teach till your second hands. So I think they just wanted that money to keep coming in, rather than a blue, green and brown belt bringing the money in. Now there's a black belt bringing the money in, but it might get bigger if the black belt's going to bring the money in, rather than offshoot. But I had no idea of offshooting. I wanted to teach Goju for Tino. Just give him, what's the financial deal? Can I live? Can I get off the doors and save my marriage? So it turned out that discussing that at home with the boss, not the boss, but the higher rank, said, maybe it'd be a good idea to start your own club up. What's this all about, you know? It seems a bit funny that you can get it if you do what you're told, going to another place, but you stay home, you can't get it.
Yeah.
So we decided to, plus I was teaching bouncers anyway. I had been teaching bouncers at the Catcher nightclub since I was a brown belt. I had my own classes for just guys who worked for me. Nobody else was invited. I hadn't even met Richard at this stage, before I met Richard. And Tom Jones, some of those guys were bouncers and got in on that. Nicky Pappas, they were there in the very early days. And so I said, yeah, I'll just, you know, I think I kept going in that to Catcher, and it just grew and grew, and I'd better get a premises somewhere. So we wound up opening up the famous 48 Elizabeth Street. Yeah. And that became its own reputation. 1 floor in one building, 1 floor in 2 buildings, 3 floors, 4 floors, 4 floors running 4 classes every hour.
So what was the period of time between, you think, 1 floor and having...
Overnight.
Yeah, it was a meeting, wasn't it?
Yeah, really?
We used to go to Bruce Lee movies. I used to go to Bruce Lee movie with 150 flyers, we'd get 10%. Twice a day.
I remember we would go into the movie theatres and do little demos before the action films. We'd do Psy or whatever the hell it was. But again, it was still, you've got to remember, a magical time for martial arts because again, it had that mystical kind of lure.
So there must have been a lot of excitement.
He let me beat him up doing 3 battles. Yeah. That was fun.
Yeah. So the general excitement around it, of so many people being interested and you running classes and the size of it must have been an amazing experience to be a part of something in its embryo, you know, and growing it out.
Well, then Paul Dainty, so that started in 1970. Then Paul Dainty arrived in 1972 and said, I've got a band I'd like you to work with. It's their bodyguards, you and Richard. And I said, oh, we talked for 5 or 10 minutes, and then he said who the band was. He said, the Rolling Stones. You want us to work with the Rolling Stones? So not only Victoria was talking about us now with 1 or 2 clubs, we already had 2 or 3 clubs going just on the swing from Elizabeth Street. Elizabeth Street was always famous, always famous, because of the 4 floors. We were training 300 people a day. Yeah. You run 4, 5, 6 classes through 4 floors, you've got to become famous, you know. But when the Rolling Stones came, and him and me are standing there, doing our best to look like tough guy bodyguards, it worked.
I did. I looked tough.
It must have been
But I think just let me throw in at least, and again from my perspective, the the Elizabeth Street, why it was so electric was, and we talked about this earlier, that the caliber of student we had from day one were like ridiculous, you know, as far as physical ability.
90% were bouncers.
Yeah. So it was already this amazing, and it wasn't like a whole lot of, I'm not putting down the average person, but these guys were already so physically able to have them all lined up wearing gis and wanting to learn this. I mean, what an amazing energy.
And that structure attracted a famous marathon runner who could run 26 miles 3 days a week. Super fit, super skinny. Yep. His name was Malcolm Anderson.
Yeah, right.
Within 3 months, him and George Romulidis, who was a first generation ethnic, he came out here when he was 5 or 6 years old, got beat up at school every day for 10 years. And somebody said to me one day, why don't you go to the ethnic coaches? What's that mean? So it was Bob Jones school down there. And that night, around that time, I looked at the class, there was 70, 80 people on the floor. I only spotted about 10 what they called skips. Yep. Everybody else was from Yugoslavia, from Vietnam, from Thailand, from Lebanon, the Zacharias and all when they first joined up. So we become known as the guys that teach the ethnic kids, well, it's a place you could go as a European kid and be safe. Yep. Anywhere else you got beat up. If you're walking the streets of Melbourne in the 70s, late 60s and 70s, you were a target. But to start training with us and wear a Bob Jones t-shirt or a Bob Jones dragon, getting taught by Richard Norton because I was busy travelling, I was never there. I was always going around opening up other clubs in other states.
Plus, as you know, that was always a thing.
Ah, that's yes.
Yeah. That old Bushido cross. Ooh.
So you working at immigration, you weren't handing out flyers as people...
No. I didn't do that. I had others do that for me.
Constant eyes from me. Why the hell do you come in Croydon and work in an office all day and go back to Croydon? Why don't you come and do this full time with me? But he was going, oh, I had a very good job, a well-paid job.
Well, again, that's I was a typical family influence. I mean, my mum was, as a lot of them were then, you need to have security in your job, you've got to save up your holiday pay and your superannuation, all this sort of stuff.
All the smart stuff.
That's what you've got, So I was training in the morning, every lunchtime, and then teaching every night. And it was a good balance for me, though, because immediately it wasn't like the thing I did full-time for a living, so doing the job at work was all you're looking at the time is when you could then go to Elizabeth Street and this is what I love doing. So I actually didn't mind the balance.
Yeah, and then from the other perspective, we had bouncers joining up, 90% bouncers joining up. So it didn't take long to train them to a level to get like Steve Pfeiffer to go to Sydney, Rod Stroud to go to Perth, Paddy Holt went to Adelaide and kicked it off. George Romulidis went to Queensland, then Malcolm went to Queensland and George went to the Sunshine Coast. So I was just spreading out these bouncers and streetwise kids that weren't bouncers. I mean, Malcolm Anderson was a marathon runner on such and such a high.
Malcolm was a bank clerk when he joined us. Yeah. He worked in the bank.
No, and he's still today, he's not with us, I know, but you can't hold grudges to such a guy out his underreach. Yeah. Because he's become a brilliant martial artist, from what I hear. We haven't spoken, but if I saw Malcolm in the street tomorrow, I'd love to have a coffee with him. Yep. That's an invitation.
Fantastic. So you started expanding through Australia, but you also had these other things going on, and this is probably where you two sort of started going off on slightly different paths. So always together, but slightly different paths in that Richard stayed with the security work and headed off to do that full time.
I only brought Chuck Norris to Australia for one reason, to meet him. Yep. I had a plan to help him become what he wanted to be. And that's how it went on. And Chuck Norris came out, they got on like a house on fire. And next thing was, he's in a movie with Chuck. He's put all the gear on him so they can't see him, because he looks so fantastic.
I was there in spirit.
Your first full-time work was as security for one of the bands, was it?
Yeah, well, because, as Bob said, we started with the Stones, and then every act that Paul Daly brought out, he rang us. Because it's that, I'd say to people, that sort of work was really more word of mouth. It's not the sort of job you could send in a resume saying, I've worked in the military for this. It was really being hired because you'd be trusted. You wouldn't talk about what went on the road and all that sort of stuff. So we worked with Joe Cocker and Fleetwood Mac and Linda Ronstadt and James Taylor. So Linda was the one that asked me to go and work for her full-time in California. And like I was saying before, even job security, that was a big decision for me then. So, I've got a job, got a girlfriend, everything's got the clubs.
But even then the replacement was great. Dennis Sainson came in and replaced.
Well, I got Dennis to come over and work with Fleetwood when I couldn't keep doing it. Yep. But Linda, I still say to everyone, Linda was the one person that said to me, you know what, why don't you try it? You can always go back home.
Yep.
And that was when I went, you know what, off we go. And that's why I say to people, when certain situations are presented to you, you know, just sometimes you just got to take a punt. You got to get out of your comfort zone and what I call dare to participate, and that's how all that
I
started.
think that's one of the things that most impressed me about both of you constantly throughout your whole lives is that there's never been anyone to follow. So you guys have been offered something or have desired something, and you've just said, "Well, have a go." You know, so who was running martial arts clubs? Who was expanding? No one. You know, who started doing security? No one in Australia. So you guys, you were constantly willing to say, "We'll try it." You know, let's see how it goes.
And we set a benchmark. A lot of people try to copy it, but it's hard. It's hard to become famous. And you know, the band's helped us. The band certainly helped us.
Yep.
Becoming rock and roll international. And the band spoke highly of us and who replaced us on the road.
Yeah,
The band Johnson's now coming down to everybody else.
That's why I was saying it's like word of mouth, because and the fact that we could look like a member of the band, we kind of dressed like them. It wasn't that big, heavy over thing of a big dude, right? You know,
The Sydney Herald ran a big photo of the Rolling Stones. Him, Paul Fleming, and Nicky Pappas, because they look so much like the band.
They thought they were in it.
The stupid journalists put their photo in the newspaper, the Rolling Stones. one time, you probably got the sack.
Yeah.
It's one of my favourite stories ever. The Rolling Stones.
Yeah, I call myself in that.
One of the things that I look back to is that Zen Do Kai had a certain flair that's unusual, I think, in a lot of martial arts. And I was wondering how much of that came from your influence in such artistic people with bands and things like that. You know, we had the different coloured uniforms. Your gradings that you developed, Soke Bob, were flamboyant more than most sort of styles.
Yeah.
Was that an influence on it? Or?
Oh, definitely. But that's because we were mixing the band so much.
Mm.
And my creation of kickboxing was from Paul Dainty. I stole it explicitly off him. But he got cameras everywhere, bored in 10, 20, 30, 40,000 people, stuck them facing the stage, spotlights, and here's the boys doing their thing on stage. And I went, if I took them off the stage and put them in a boxing ring in the centre and made the seats go around that way, we could get the same crowd to come and see our shows.
Yep.
Then Dana White came along and the rest of the world's history.
Yeah.
He opened it up to the cage. I've got this great idea, two guys covered in blood in a cage. Nobody wanted to do it. He fought everybody and finally got it done, and now it's famous all around the planet. It's the fastest growing sport on earth.
Yeah.
And you know what I'd say was so ahead of its time with that, and it's only much later, I forget who it was, we were talking about the idea of coming down and kneeling down and all the pomp and pageantry. He said the reason that's so attractive to the average person is no matter how much they try and train at home in their garage or whatever, they can never replicate that experience of walking into the Senja or something like that. I mean, where else could you do that? So I think that was an attractive part of it too, you know. Hey, churches have been doing it forever, haven't they? You look at the pomp and pageantry and all of this, and it works. People go in and go, oh my God. And I think they would walk into a huge grading day with hundreds and hundreds of people all in uniform, all lined up. And I think that would be equally impressive.
That development of ceremony and the crosses and all the things that were put in place to me, was definitely a major part of growth. And I think if someone was to do a business case on the amazing growth of that period, I think all of those things would be there. That the amazing skill of the people that were involved, but for sure the pomp and ceremony and the awards and everything that was in there placed by step. And I don't even know if some of it was thought out to be that way, but it was the perfect construction.
His mind never stopped.
Yeah.
It's true, but it's a good thing, and as you know, it's still going to this day. But that's honestly such an entrepreneurial mind. I mean, I will admit, I'm a good lieutenant, you know. But the ideas were all Bob's, and I think it comes out of necessity too, you know. Like, remember when we started, for those who don't know, when we started, Zen Do Kai was called Australian Goju, but we were getting flack about using the Japanese name.
Sal Ebenez complained.
Yeah.
That was all it took. End of that name.
Yeah.
Sal said, I'm not happy about you using Australian Goju.
But how good was that incident?
Yes.
To make the originality of you know, still Japanese words, but still Zen Do Kai, which, by the way, you know, when we're going to talk about that, you know, I think I mentioned that a little while ago, somebody, a few years ago, Blitz said, interviewer said, "Oh, how's Zen Do Kai? You know, how's the BJMA now that it's all mixed martial arts?" And I said, "It's business as usual." From the day one we were mixing arts. You know, Tony Quinn was a wrestler. With all these aspects because of the bouncers. We're already doing, albeit today it's far more refined, no question, but we're already doing that.
Shoot wrestling, shoot boxing.
Yeah.
They're all 5-10 years before UFC. Yeah. It's the same thing. We trained on Friday nights what we called a street fighting class. Mm-hmm. And after class, half the class went off and worked clubs all over Melbourne. A bit like the Tino, favourite technique on Saturday. Yeah. Bob Jones' favourite techniques on Friday night, but you can use them all and you can do 100 techniques. Now off we went.
And half our students went to get their teeth replaced.
I've always found when we've had international instructors running seminars or something like that they gravitate towards our students because we seem to have a fair all-rounded knowledge and an ability and they can see that to teach and adapt quickly. They're not rigid of mindset. So that MMA concept, I'm so grateful for it. It's helped me a lot.
It's taken on a new meaning very, very soon. MMA will become, you all know about matadors and martial arts and modern martial arts. Now I've got marathon martial arts coming. The highlight of marathon martial arts is a triathlon, a combat triathlon. Enough said today, but it's coming. It's going to be big. If you're in Thailand this trip, you know what's coming. Mixing the boxing, especially talking with the flat-footed stance, just pushing the flat-footed stance, which couldn't come at a better time. Because how do the Tyson Furies and the Mike Tysons, how do they punch?
And
he's bothered to pull the pieces. I'm too busy with the idea going on. Shit, I need that. This morning we were discussing it before with the camera on.
And the last thing I'd say about that too, with what we did is, this is what I keep saying to our instructors, you have no excuse, become your own instructor, because we have no choice but to keep looking outside of our little paradigm to increase our knowledge, because you've got guys coming in every week, you know, full floors. What do I teach them? What do I teach them? Need something new. You keep updating. But I think that gave us a real kick in the bum, the fact that we had to be our own instructors. Does that make sense? Otherwise, if we'd stayed maybe under Goji, you would still be under Tino or under Cell or whatever. Not saying that's a bad thing, but it is still that, as opposed to opening the door to...
They wouldn't have allowed us to go so MMA minded. Yeah. We would have say more Goju, you know.
Right. And I think that's a really good segue into Zen Do Kai becoming BJMA with your introduction of other styles of martial arts. So you saw something worked, you incorporated into Zen Do Kai, but you also said we can specialise in this a little bit more. So things like the kickboxing, the ninjutsu that we did for a while, the kendo, MMA.
We tried it all, didn't we?
Yeah.
Over the years. And some of the guys got Billy Ferguson in his heyday. Was one of the best kendo experts you could mix up. Was it us? Yes, it was us in Japan that night at the Budokan.
Yeah, Budokan. Well, that was with Linda.
The two of them just said,
it was Peter Asher.
You know, give me 20 minutes.
Where are those? Where's the famous bodyguard? Because we're all like, we just couldn't wait to get to this famous Budokan. You know, meanwhile Linda's being attacked by 8 dudes. We'll be there.
There was hundreds of guys doing kendo here. There was hundreds of guys doing judo there, jitsu there. Every dojo you went to in the Budokan, there was hundreds of guys doing all the stuff we wanted to do. Yeah. I said, this is us. We're going to open up one of these, you know, and do all this.
Yeah, stuff you, Linda.
And he came out and he said, I said 20 minutes. It's been an hour.
Yeah. But what a perfect way to, the way it's been created, it's the perfect way for our members to be able to sample things and have that growth under our umbrella still, and they can experience those things. And if they still need more, then no one stops them from doing it. We're open for that sort of learning.
And I've got a show coming to the Budokan as soon as possible that you must bring a team to from Australia as a flight over on holiday. It'll be called MMA, Matadors and Martial Arts. It's the connection between Moriya Shiba and Juan Belmont. Juan Belmont was a bullfighter, and Moriya Shiba invented the David Brown technique for Aikido that David Brown taught us. So I said to David, I've got to go check this. Now it was the same. Now I want to do a whole big paraphernalia show connecting martial arts and bullfighting. It'll be done soon.
That's a really good link, talking about a couple of your martial arts mentors, I guess, Chief, or however you'd like to phrase it. And for you too, Richard, it'd be great if you could just, I'm going to be harsh and ask if you could pick 3 outside martial artists.
I've only got one. Him. He's always been my driving force. Always behind me, always busy doing his films and stuff, but always coming back. and always getting better. He's been away for 12 months, he's been away for 2 years, he comes back and he's better. He's looking better, he's moving faster. So it was always my driving force.
Drugs.
Then I learned, I tell you, I've got a great story like that. I remember when we were lower ranks, I was a brown belt at the time, so I was a brown belt. And we were on a summer camp. He might not remember this, I hope he does. Tino and Sal were sparring in a waterfall, just behind the backdrop. It was only a bit higher than the ceiling, coming down behind them. Yep. They were in front of it with the white uniforms on, knee deep. But the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Tino would a roundhouse kick it, and the water would spray over Sal, 3 metres behind him over his head, splash on his face and go behind him. Then he'd do the same thing. He was moving with so much speed and force with his shoulders, with his punches, the water was spraying and mixing in all directions. It was like it was slowed the water down too. Yeah. The kick was that bloody fast, the water moved slowly, which made it poetry in motion. About 3 years later, we were on a camp together, and there was a girl there, she was a green belt. And I said, we were asking the class around, well, what's your most experience, in martial arts? She said, yesterday, when you and Richard sparred one another, and then you sparred all the black belts together, coming in pairs. She said, but when you and Richard were together, she said, the kicks were that fast, and the punches were that fast, and the water was that slow. It was the same waterfall, the same camp. But to have that said to me, I thought, we are progressing in a good direction here. Yeah. We're replicating Tino and Sal. That's when I knew we were on a good path, we were going in a good direction.
It's a good fit. Because, and Bob would agree, we're always not yin and yang, but kind of, but in the best possible way. Because, they say the worst person in any enterprise or business is the expert, meaning the one person who thinks that at all, but we would bounce so much stuff, and I really think that gave a fantastic balance, for what we're doing. And those camps, tell you probably don't remember, this is just to humanise us. I remember the first time I ever wore hakama, as it's a thing. So I'll tell it.
You never tell this story.
Yeah, no, because it's too funny now. Because we literally could have walked on water back in those days. So there's a lunch break, and we think, we'll go out and do a little weapons training. So I walk out in my, put it on, walk out, but it's all very slow, and people are hanging out the window. And I thought,
the whole camp was out looking.
I'll just warm up with a nice front kick. So I threw this front kick, but up I go in the air like this, bam, flat on my back, and I'm like, what the fuck? What happened? I get up and I put both legs into one thing.
I was still big enough not to notice it, it was all strange. Walked all the way over.
Yeah, because we were walking slowly, it's only when I kicked and the leg hit the edge of the thing and up I went. I said, well, there's the
equaliser. Did you turn into a break fall and a
cat flip? All right, so that's what happens if you get your kick grabbed, you just hit that ground. Can you imagine? You get up and you're like, oh God, I'll never live that one.
I never imagine him ever telling that story. I tell it all the time.
Yeah, see,
couple of red wines, that's my favourite story.
I'll tell you another one while we're stopping ourselves here. No, it's still about me. I was up in Queensland, and same thing. I did a grading for Malcolm Anderson. We're talking about him. Anyway, we had a little drink in the airport, and we go to get in. This is when there's just a mesh gate they'll open to go to the plane.
Yep.
So we're a little late. They shut the gate. So I said, oh shit, I'm going to miss my flight. So I had the thongs on. So I jumped up on this gate, and somehow my thong got caught. I went flat on my back on the tarmac. And I'm lying there for a minute, and I just happened to look around, and Malcolm said they all, there's a few of them, they looked at each other and they just ran. Yeah. They said, if they knew if I saw them and they'd seen it, I'd go and bash them all. And all I remember hearing is there was a woman with a couple of kids, and she says, oh, that man's drunk. So thank you very much.
I've never heard that story before.
Yeah, no,
I'll tell that when I had 4 wines.
And I remember I walked to the plane. I thought if I look around, I'll chase Malcolm more than bash him up. But it's too funny. Anyway,
the construction of our gradings, you Chief generally tested them on yourself, and then Richard and the others would come through and repeat them, and you would try and work out how many rounds needed to be done or other things. Is there any specific gradings that you liked more than others, or that you like seeing more than others, or are they all the same?
I've always enjoyed the 4th dan gradings, but more enjoy the fifth dan because of my overall view of what the gradings are about and what the forms are about. I like to visualise, okay, another fifth dan's just come through. He's going to get the picture now over the next, because it only takes 15 years to get to fifth dan. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 is 15. From fifth dan to ninth dan, 10th dan, there's another 40 years because it's 55 years. So when you've done 15, there's 40 in front of you. That's exciting to me.
Yep.
Will they last the big run now? They've hit the big run. And of course some people use that to go into, Paul Jeffries invented physiocram, gone off and become a multi-millionaire. So many famous people have come out of that 15 gradings. Many of them we don't even know about. They went off in separate directions. But answering your question, 4th and 5th dans I think are my favourite.
Yep. And was there a grading when you were testing it that has stuck in your mind? I know you're second dan grading with a lot of people and things, but...
That's a Billy Monet story.
Yep.
He tells that story. I get fascinated. Is that how it went down? He sees it the way he saw it. And it's pretty much factual all the way through. It's the most amazing story when he tells it.
Yep.
Because the French guy was there. There was a French guy there with a black belt with a red centre on it. And he became annoying because he was trying to leg kick me all the time. I remember this is part of Billy's story that I love, this is where the spinning back kick went in and foam vomit came out and they had to carry him to the toilet. So they kicked him that freaking hard because he was busting my legs up. So I'd never seen a leg kick before. We didn't do them.
Yes.
But after that grading, well, we'd better introduce leg kicks, have a look at that. Then Thailand convinced us. A couple of weeks later we went to Thailand.
Leg kicks don't work.
Why would you ever do those?
Yeah. Kick with a shin.
Yeah.
Who does that?
Only whips kick the waist.
Stand the man longer knees.
Oh,
I said to him, you're not kicking right, mate, you know, or the way you kick. Something came out like that. He said, I don't like that shin on shin. I said, did someone teach you to kick shin on shin? He said, well, when you kick, he said, that's if you check. But you know you're doing a checking and you're going off angle. That damages the shin and hits you. Like Happy Heskin in Perth had his leg, he broke the other guy from Perth, from Brisbane. Heavyweight came up from Brisbane to fight Happy Heskin in Perth. First round, first leg check, broke his leg in 2 or 3 places. The guy from Queensland. Because he just knew how to put him, and it never hurt him at all. Yeah. So I said to Stan, you're not doing something right. Who was out for that?
Not Alexia.
No, the guy you love from Los Angeles.
Pete Cunningham.
Pete Cunningham was there. Yeah. So he was having a little giggle. Stan said, I don't like checking. Because Pete had already been to Thailand half a dozen times, you know. But Pete Cunningham's the one I saw in Edmonton when there was a world... When I refereed the Muhammad Ali fight. Yep. Yeah, I was in the ring doing the refereeing for Muhammad Ali and the ice hockey player. It was raising money for charity, you know. And Pete Cunningham fought for a world title that night. And I came home raving about him. And then he met him a couple of years later and they've spent the last 30 years together.
30 years.
He's an amazing individual and I've been lucky enough to do a couple of seminars with him and picked up a lot.
Because he was taught by Ben Yergidez. That's getting taught by the best on the planet.
For me, he was always like what I would call a Sugar Ray Leonard of kickboxing. You know,
yes, just definitely.
So slick, smooth, and that front leg, the extension he got on a kick,
But Stan the Man certainly got the power up on his leg kicks.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
He could destroy.
But he was talking about understanding Thai boxing. How they check. They deliberately check. They know what they're doing. They turn the foot, they turn the heel out and turn the toes back. So you hit the face of the shin on the off edge of the front, the other leg kick you're coming in. And you'd be lucky if your leg doesn't get broken. If you get caught with it. If you throw a really hard kick at a Thai.
I was color commentary on Alexio and Longanides fight. That's when Alexio's shin, both places. Threw a kick, Stan checked it, and that was it.
No,
it was the other way around.
He stepped in a hole.
Oh, right. A loose mat. Amazing, huh?
Damien Meyer in Perth was fighting a Thai and bridging his ground, and the Thai came across and broke the back leg that he was standing on. That's how powerful they can kick some of those Thais.
Tony Quinn did his shin in Japan, didn't he?
Yep.
Broke his shin.
Tabata used to break Coca-Cola bottles over his shin.
Yeah.
Tabata, the Japanese kickboxer, used to use an empty Coca-Cola bottle and hit his shin and break the bottle. Try that sometime.
I was just wondering, you've gone from quite a traditional style that you've started melding and developing, and then there was a bit of a leap into the sports martial arts. Is that because it was happening around the globe, or that was a natural link for you anyway?
No, I always wanted to build the crowds up so I could pay money. I was losing money promoting kickboxing shows because I wasn't getting the crowds, and I had no sponsorship. You can't do a kickboxing show and pay big prize money with no sponsor and no TV. It doesn't work. So I better get TV. If I get TV, I might get a sponsor. If I get TV and a sponsor, I'll get ticket buyers. That's how it works. Dana White had the magic down because he took it to another level with the realism.
Yep.
But the Dana White fight is the fight that the whole world wants to stop and see. If you go to a football match, and I've heard Dana tell this story, you go to a football match, AFL, the guys are kicking the ball, they're kicking goals, kicking points, but if a fight breaks down the back pocket, or out of, even off the arena, back of the goals, the whole 50,000 people will go, zap, there's a fight on.
Yeah.
And we'll watch the fight for as long as it, if the police don't come and break it up or it doesn't happen, you'll keep watching that fight and forget the guys are not playing.
Yeah,
Because they want to watch the fight. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So he hit the magic stream. Or what was that guy's name that was Chuck Norris's right-hand man?
Pat Johnson.
Pat Johnson. I had the luck and experience, luck and pleasure to train with Pat Johnson. No, yeah, it is. What was it? Pat Johnson?
Pat Johnson used to be partners, yeah, with
Yes.
one of his.
I mean, when he had all those classes going every week. Pat Johnson said to me, "Oh, you're a stylist. Do you want to do some sparring?" I sat on the back leg, bounced the front foot, held my hands up. And he said, "Oh, you're a stylist." And I didn't know what that meant. He said, "Oh, I'm a freestylist." He said, "We just fight from the front leg and just counter whatever happens, you know." And after I picked myself up the 15th time in a 3-minute sparring round, I thought, I'm doing something wrong. This guy can just flip me anytime he wants to.
Yep.
And he teaches you to the way of moving and set me up, because I hadn't done it before. My reactions would make me go down. But of course, once I saw that, I thought, I'm going to stay here now for 6 months.
Well, and Mike Stone had a big influence on
Oh yeah, Mike Stone was another one who had never had a point scored against him. Can you imagine that?
Really?
6 or 7 years into competition, won everything he ever did.
Yeah.
There was no, like Connor had that for a while.
Yep.
And the Russian kid. I mean, they just don't get beaten for ages and ages and ages, yeah. Mike Stone had that. He couldn't be scored on. And then he saw Elvis's wife, so that made him pretty famous too.
Yeah.
A week before Pauline, my wife and I arrived, Priscilla had left Elvis and gone with Mike. So we were going to his tournament. He had a tournament circuit called Four Seasons, which was my introduction to Four Seasons, which is now Celtic culture, with Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane and Rudnazar. They're the 4 Celtic seasons for summer, water, winter and spring. So I was there for his summer tournaments.
Yeah.
And just a great experience and a beautiful man. And you couldn't score him. I used to spar him every night.
Yeah.
I mean, you could score him, of course, because we were better then. I was probably a good second dan by then, you know.
Yeah.
And he was whatever he was, a good 4th or 5th dan.
And was this travel with the bands and things, or was this travel that you took specifically to grow your...
This was just before the Stones tour, 72.
Yeah, right.
So it was early, yeah. I went over to America. And then all the Stones, and we were already pumping then. So I went to America to go on a tournament circuit to make myself famous in Australia. I'll go to America and train with the Americans and get on the American circuit. He was still 100% Japanese orientated. And I was, I said, well, I'm going to go to America. But when I come back, I said, mate, you've got to believe me, go to America. And he's been to Japan everywhere since then. And we've all gone to Thailand.
Yeah.
So we went from on the back leg with Tino, we went to the front leg with Pat Johnson, and then we went back to Thailand and they put us on the back leg again.
Yeah.
For whenever you want to use it, whatever you want to use it for.
Yeah.
We were just getting better and better and better because we were being introduced to all these different concepts, you know.
And Soke, Richard, when you were working over in America, you were training many times a day with top people, and you managed to put yourself into a hub of very experimental people. So anything that was sort of getting developed and shown as being effective was brought into your sphere.
Yeah, I think I was lucky enough to have a good mixture of both. Like I was training, before the Jet Center with Benny the Jet, Cadet, so American style of kickboxing, not so much, Thai style as you know. Of course, meeting people like Pete Cunningham, but I was also training, we travelled out to Orange County and trained with Fumio Demura, who was just unbelievable. Bob knows, we used to watch his demonstrations he did near Disneyland at a place called Deer Park. Amazing, but totally traditional, so I'd go and train with him. And then, of course, every morning I was training with Chuck Norris at his house. And again, Chuck, as Bob would know, very, very open, very innovative and everything else, very different style to what I was used to. So with all of that, and I went and lived with Bill Wallace in Memphis for a while with him training, that was all through Chuck. Tadashi Yamashita, Shunryu martial artist that I met on the set of Octagon, so I learned some amazing stuff from him.
He's got them listed every name. I remember better and better. Tadashi Yamashita, you go up the list. Benny Hercules, Tadashi. He's going up the list from low down here.
Such an amazing melting pot, you know. So, I mean, I used to travel again, I'm talking miles, 280 miles a day. Because in my head I was thinking, oh, it's all going to stop tomorrow, I got to go, I got to get this. I mean, I overtrained, but yeah, it was an incredible experience.
I don't think he would have done that in Japan, to be honest with you. Very sincere belief that we are a Western style from everything we've done, And he went away making films, so I claimed the name Bob Jones Martial Arts. But it was all done by mixing with everybody.
Yeah.
Thailand, and even now, going into Serbia, going into Philippines for a Screamer Kali, which came into our style because an 18-year-old kid got stabbed to death. Like one of the shows you were doing, the Victorian Championships, that 16-year-old just got his black belt. I was telling Richard this morning. And he just became the Victorian champion for our annual tournament.
Yes.
He went to a rock and roll venue that night in the car, and undoing his seatbelt to get out of the car, gets stabbed 3 times, murdered in the car. Next day, a few days later, a week later, I went to the funeral, which was full of Lebanese people talking about Bob Jones. He starts to stop, people don't get stabbed when they're saying Bob Jones. So I knew, well, we're teaching wasn't that good.
What could be better?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of Peter Shannon. Peter Shannon came to me a few days later and said, I've been messing around for 12 months with this style called a Screamer Kali, yeah? A Screamer Kali?
Yep.
What's Mark's second name?
Mark Slot.
Mark Slot. We were discussing this morning.
Right.
What a good teacher Mark is. I was discussing to Richard. So I went to the Philippines that year, and I was just blown away by the standard of those guys. There was one guy there, I think he was from Holland. I wish I knew his name. Slim. Looked like Robert. But there was some big New York police there, special squads, had been sent in to do the stick and knife training, Of course, good for defending themselves. And this guy looked around and he picked these 3 guys. He said, I need 2 or 3 guys. So how about you guys? Will you give me a hand? And I thought, how's this going to work? He doesn't know them, he doesn't train them. He disarmed them, he wrapped them up, he tied them in knots, and I went, oh my God, these guys are really into something here. Yeah. It was brilliant. No pre-arranged stuff at all, And the coppers were blown away. They were big men and didn't want to be embarrassed.
Yeah.
you could read it in the eye. they were bull cops. They're big, strong men, New York cops.
I said, why don't you come to New York and try it?
Exactly.
Richard, I've seen you do some stick work in some of your films. Did you do much training in it, or?
Not so much stick.
Yep.
No, it was more Okinawan weapons, bow, sai. Katana,
We know no one does sai like him.
Yeah.
Not so much sticks. I do regret not having delved more into the Filipino arts. Obviously, knowing good old Dan, Dan Innocente for so long, and Ron Balicki, his son-in-law, did quite a bit of work with him, and some of the knife stuff and stick stuff. I'm like, oh my God. I never actually got into it like I could have and should have, because I think the principles and all of it would transfer to so many other things, but as you know, there's only so many hours in the day. But I did like weapons, and the thing with film is you have to kind of come up. You have to keep reinventing yourself a little bit. Yep. I love doing it anyway, but out of necessity, I would try and increase my skill set for that as well.
You see, coming through the movies, as a martial art becomes more prominent in the society, that it becomes more prominent in the movies, and then it builds it in society, and then sometimes it goes through trend lines where it comes in
people
strong.
get bored. The thing with movies, it's like you're entertaining an audience. It doesn't matter how good something is. It's like a magic trick. You do it twice or 3 times. Who cares? And look at Steven Seagal when he did Under Siege and those early movies, or what was his first, Nico Above the Law. People had never seen Aikido, guy with his hands down here and guys flipping through the air. Cut to a few movies later, it's still just as good, but people are like, oh, I've seen that, what else can you do? Hence him starting to try and punch and kick, which didn't work out so well. But you had to keep doing that with movies. They started with ninja movies, Vietnam movies, kickboxing. Now, of course, it's MMA. It's just the nature of it.
And with you in your modern life of doing that sort of work, is it hard coming up with a new way to strip a gun, or a new way to kick someone down the stairs, or?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the most stressful part. Like, I just finished Suicide Squad 2 with James Gunn. Wonderful experience. Margot Robbie, Idris Elba, and John Cena Big John, teaching him sword routines. But of course, usually the thing is, oh, we want something different, to which I would say, well, that's impossible. Just about every move possible has already been done on screen. So now your trick is how do you shake it up a little bit, and it's really based on character and story. It's a whole different application. You know, and a lot of the movies I did in the 80s, we knew as long as you had 6 fight scenes, you could sell the movie. Wouldn't matter what else was in it, right?
I find every other movie now.
Yeah.
Every other second movie mentions UFC in some way.
Yeah.
They used to train in UFC, or they're thinking about taking it up to have a fight.
Well, they give them a license, you know, that's like giving it a character. They'll give a bit of a backstory, which means now it's okay for him to be doing,
Leg takeout.
yeah, all of that. Otherwise you'd be going, well, how the hell does he know how to do it?
Used to UFC when I was 14.
But a lot of it's just boredom, you know, honestly. People just get bored seeing the same thing. Doesn't mean it's not as good, but how else can you entertain me? I mean, Jackie Chan went through that. The early movies I did with Jackie was very big and over the top, very Chinese based.
Yeah.
But even he said, no, I have to bring boxing into it. And I saw him
he'd slam a fridge door and pull an ironing board out of the laundry and wipe out 4 loads of an ironing board. Where did you get all these ideas from? He always comes up with something different.
You know where he got that from? Is from Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. Three Stooges. Yeah. Jackie had every movie they ever did because he said to me, I want people to be able to turn sound off, no dialogue, and enjoy the physicality and the comedic aspect of a fight. And if you're watching, that's what he did. Yeah. There was a review I once wrote about Jackie. They said it's like watching a speeding bullet in reverse. Because remember, Charlie Chaplin was always trying to get away from the big guy and having him run into things and do all that. That was Jackie's kind of stick, and he'd come up with different gags. But I was going to say, if you watch Jackie in, say, Karate Kid, or some of the movie Sammo's in his late 60s now, instead of this, all this big stuff, it's still his dramatic ability, and all the fights are like you would see in Taken or The Bourne Identity. They're very much close quarters combat, so in a very kind of Western style of action, and they do it better than anybody still.
And the Matrix put a few new angles in, didn't they?
All that. The Matrix was groundbreaking with what they brought in.
And the film skills on
They're doing another Matrix right now. They started it, but it stopped, but it's about to kick off again, and another Matrix with Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm. Little top secret info there.
Yeah. Oh shit, did I just...
So that idea behind having to change and our system, the best of everything in progression, which I think is one of the best terms ever come up with, but even into our things like our freeform, we need to try and keep developing that idea of not showing the same things over again. So whereas our forms are very concise and put into a box, when you created the idea of freeforms, Chief, you did that for that ideas of let's bring other things in and not show the same things every time.
Well, I just fell in love with Wim Hof in the last 12 months. And bugging me dead, he comes home and says, I want to change the breathing. Sounds like Wim Hof. We change that tomorrow. And because he kept saying, oh, this is only how I train, the grading's got to stay the same. There's one story there we'll leave alone, it's a bit violent with George Romulidis. But I'm so glad Richard changed the breathing to be more formatted to more people.
Yep.
My kind of breathing and the Billy Monet kind of breathing, we can still scare the shit out of anybody just breathing at them, which is the George Romulidis story. And I want that to remain there for people to go, okay, Bob does it that way, Richard does it that way. What better can you have, him and me, explaining the same thing, breathing, with different entities to it. I don't think one's bad or the other's bad.
I think what is good, the way I look at it, I use the analogy of, say, learning to play the piano. Everybody learns the same notes, the same chords, same scale. Then they play somebody else's song that's been written. They learn that. The ultimate expression is when they write their own music. So that becomes individual expression, right?
Taking a little bit of
so that's all freeform is, right? You learn. Everybody learns all these basics, does them the same. All the forms do them the same. The chance that they become artists is, as Bob's brought in, is the freeform where you take the same notes, the same chords and everything, but it becomes your expression. And I think that's so healthy for the style. Because you would do a totally different freeform to what I would do, to what Bob would do, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's, for me, is the best thing I see about that. Whether it's, and we would talk about the free form is that. Well, what's the ultimate free form? It's sparring.
Yeah.
You don't do what anybody else does. You react. You do what you
or
do.
Or fighting 8 guys up an alley and going, what happened?
Well,
They all fell over.
Yeah.
And it'd be different. It'd be different for everybody fighting those same people
Yeah.
up the alley. So I just think it makes perfect sense to take that rigidity, but that's to teach you structure. Because again, you can't play somebody else if you don't learn the same chords and everything. They're the constant, and then you express yourself. So free form in the way of the forms, and then obviously it's a stepping stone sparring.
And it's where that body size or restrictions or health or your ability to do amazing things isn't constricted, then you can show what you are best at and what you...
Yeah, you don't have to do what I would do or what Bob would do or what you would do. You do what is best for your physicality, exactly.
There's a great story we both connected to that's in my book already, unknown to Richard. He was telling me about the same
Wait a minute,
thing.
hold on. Turn that camera off.
But there was an interview in 1937 with Joan Belmont, I mentioned him earlier, the bullfighter, and he describes what it's like to walk into an arena of 60,000 people and stand there weighing 60 kilos with something breathing at you and throwing a dirt back behind him with his forward hoof and his horns razor sharp out to here, and he's about to charge at you and try and kill you. The reaction of the fight of that we go through is exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. That he had to, but he described it. Sorry, he describes it, and I've used it as the article that was in the newspaper in 1937. I've taken that article and put it so powerful. I put it in my book. Then he coincidentally said, "Oh, that guy connected it to the samurai, you know, the bullfighter." Yeah. And I went, "It's already in the book."
That was in Zen and Japanese culture. I mean, you've heard me say a million times, it was like my Bible, just because I like that whole aspect of Zen. But as it relates to martial arts, and yeah, there's the whole exactly the same thing, referring to the same thing as bullfighting.
Without going into crazy detail, would you like to just give us an overview of the last 10 years of what you've been doing?
An overview of the last 10 years. I've just had an interesting experience to cut it back to less than 10 months. I was in China about 3 or 4 months ago. While I'm in China, I have an altercation with the bad boys over there because I'm attracted to bad boys. We had this meeting and they're going to give me a TV show, they're going to give me sponsorship money, everything. They're not explaining how they would rig the fights. So I leant forward and said, I would never ever do anything like that. So dissolved meeting, and with 3 of the baddest guys in China in this meeting with me who'd just been pissed off, spent an hour talking to me, setting me up to give me everything I wanted, but at a price. Yep. So I decided I might even leave China now because I only had visas everywhere. So I'll go to Mexico to see Gail and her husband. Then I'll go back to Los Angeles. Then I went on to come and see you in Thailand. Yep. So I've been Portugal, China, Mexico, looking at stones everywhere. Yep. Spend every second day looking at stone sites. It's my habitual habit now, going around looking at everything like that. And I get back to Thailand with you, and I wanted to go to Sweden. So I'm in Thailand, wanting to go to Sweden. And Tracy, looking after everything for me back home, from my aspect, said, Dad, you really should come home. And she explained how she'd watched it follow me. Yeah. the virus I followed me to all, it was coming towards Thailand. I started to restrict flights.
So you brought it here?
Yeah. Yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah. But I'm glad I didn't go to Sweden because they were worse than Donald Trump. They didn't do anything. They're set up now to lose a big percent of their population, not as much as Donald. Donald's done some stuff that they won't recover from. Yep. Oh, they're going to recover from it, of course, but it's going to be worse than we can imagine. So she got me to come home, and then when I got home, I saw how bad it all was, you know. But this is the safest place to be. I'm back home in Australia for the first time in 3 years, but you know, couldn't be happier. And like Richard, the isolation's been good for me because I've knuckled into writing. I'm even writing quite a bit now on The Greatest Story Never Told.
Yeah, oh, great.
It's Esoterical 10 Degrees. Yeah. I love that. I've done 80 pages, 90 pages already, but the opening stages of it is all my grading dates. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, which takes us from 1970 to 2020, yep. To 55 years. So I went, oh, that's all written down. I forgot I'd done that. I better get back in and fill in those gaps to make this a full book. Okay. So I'm looking forward to that now.
And you've been back for a little while, and you've taken the time to actually call a lot of our club instructors.
Oh, my favourite pastime. Yeah. I love it. I'm speaking to people that I've never met. And they've been training for 14, 20, 25 years, and they're third dance, fourth dance, sixth dance. And we just don't cross paths. They come in from different country areas and stuff. They come to the big grading, so it must be a big blowout for them, you know. For us, it's another grading. It's a blowout for us too. We get that many people together at any time, you know. Some of those annual balls we've had in the past. But speaking to these people in their houses, how old are you? What rank are you? I get 34 and I'm a fourth dan. Married, yeah, married with 2 kids. How old are the kids? How smart are they? I always ask them, your kids super smart? Everyone...
my kids are idiots.
Really enjoying ringing you around. And I told you all about the book. You've all heard about the book and roughly what it's roughly about, but I will call you all again when it's accessible. And
so, Richard, each time you're back from the States or wherever you're working, Panama or wherever else film's going, you've made a real effort to run seminars at our different clubs around the country, and it's something that I know we've really appreciated speaking to the other instructors from the different areas, New Zealand, Queensland, of course for you, Victoria, and other places. Do you find enjoyment in being part of the BJMA still and being...
No, not really.
He's always honest.
Yeah, it's a bit laborious.
You told me to ask that question.
Well, I got nothing else to do, so... No, it's... God, you know, how long have we had? 55 years. How old am I? 70? 55 years. As I said, most marriages don't even last that long. First of all, there's that connection. It's such an emotional attachment to what was started in 1970 and what's still going 50 years later. You never leave that. I mean, it's like, well, Bob might go to Portugal or whatever, I might go to America, but you know where your heart is, and to come back and to still be able to, I don't know, enrich the style in whatever way you can. Because, you know, we've both been very fortunate to be able to travel a lot more than most. And if you're a teacher, I think that's your job, is to impart as much knowledge and experience as you can. And I absolutely love it. We talked about this, that even if there's only 10 people that tune in or come to a seminar, considering like with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they reckon 1 out of 1,000 will get through to black belt. Well, I take the attitude that one of those 10 people watching, they're probably the person that's going to be with the style 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And that's what makes it worthwhile. And I meant that the other day when I said, when you see all the little faces there and people are just trying to hang on to every word, there's nothing better than that. Yeah. So I'm loving it, and I'm really at a stage of life where, you know, age really tempers you, and it's such a cliche that you can't, if we dropped it tomorrow, we can't take it with us. So what's it really all for, unless you're going to pass it on? If you're a parent, you do it to your children. Well, in a way, a lot of the students in BJMA for Bob and I are like your kids, so it's kind of your job to pass it on. But it's not just a job, it's exhilarating when there's interest. As long as people show an interest to get better, to be better martial artists, then that's what we've done our whole life, and that's what gives me tremendous pleasure. I love it. And I'll tell you the other reason for me personally, a bit of a selfish reason, that every time I do a seminar or a Zoom class with you, I hate to rest on my laurels. You know, I've said I hate the word mediocrity, so I'll always go back and look at notes. What's happening now? Has anybody got a different take on what we used to do? That's a real kick in the bum for me to keep improving myself and bring myself up to whatever the knowledge base is possible today. So it serves both, and now I can pass it on. And like I said, it's really the same as we did in 1970. Oh shit, we don't have instructors. So we'd go and look at other schools' tournaments, visit other clubs. What can we take? That's why we encourage all the students, go away, get as much knowledge as you can, train with whoever you like, but bring it back to the home base. Yeah. Make your home that much better. So it's a combination of all of that for me. Loving it.
Mine has broadened because I'm more into the culture now of Celtic people, which I don't want to touch that today, because I do it all like the same passion he's got for that. I'm sure will work. Back when I went to America in 1972, I trained for nearly 6 months with Chuck Norris. And Chuck Norris, I was a professional, so I could help him with his demonstrations that he would some days had to do on his own. Someone was going to help him and couldn't turn up. Oh, Bob, could you help me today? Yeah. Harry couldn't turn up, you know. Oh, sure, Chuck. So we'd talk in the car on the way there, we'd get there, and there'd be 250, 300 men no women, 350 men in this auditorium, bows and ties having lunch, listening to Chuck talk and do a bit of a demo with me, throwing around, breaking boards together and stuff. On the way home in the car, back to his studio, I said, why do you take these seminars? 300 people, men, with suits on, overweight, drinking red wine, not martial artists. He said, no, Bob, they're all psychiatrists and doctors. And he said, they appreciate what I'm doing, how my style's developed. So I learned that day, it's not just having a room full of tough guys. That day, those psychiatrists and doctors were medical men recommending students to Chuck Norris. What's that mean? Many, many years later, Mark and Julie Connell had a student about 25, 26 years of age out in Greensboro. And I watched his grading and it was terrible. And Julie came over and she said, Chief, can I ask a really big favour? And I will explain it to you afterwards, but today I need this guy to get through. It just threw me totally. But who she was in the style, 6th or 7th down as a female, I went, okay, I'll take your word, you're going to explain it to me, I'll put him through. Now the flack I got, just after grading, because you know the flack came later, when he got graded, he went down one knee, took his belt off, Bramble put it on his lap, took the other belt off, put it on. He thought he was crying. 25, 30 years of age. Ran at me, flat out, got to me, shook my hand, dropped to one knee, kept on my shoes. Thank you so much. It took me 9 years to get there today, my grading. I've been training 9 years with Mark and Julie, because I had this and this and this. And he had 4 or 5 things, was learning, learning difficulties, coordination difficulties, and he had them all.
Yep.
But she just wanted him through, because he's a big part of the new mode. It's the Chuck Norris story. Going back to 72, oh, that's why Chuck does that, because he's helping. Those people need help.
Yeah.
Those people never get a black belt. They need to stand up as something special somewhere in their life. They could probably
so his improvement had been so great that it deserved to be recognised.
The work he'd done. Yeah. I was part of doing something really good on that day, helping this person that's going through life with all of those disabilities. So I was going down the side and a couple of guys had a bit of a loud crack that I had to turn on. I said something to them which I won't repeat, but it was very, very nasty because I was in a great frame of mind. I was happy with what I'd just done, even though it didn't look very good to everybody else. Yeah. And that happens a lot in Zen Do Kai now. The doctors and psychiatrists are sending us kids with problems, and kids have got problems. That's why I love Wim Hof. He wants to create anti-anxieties with young people, because the young people are committing suicide. We've had them in the club, and we're all keen to do something about that. And that's the direction I'm looking at as well, ticking off the boxes. And I listen to his complaints, but I hear the footwork you guys were talking about this morning, looking at Mike Tyson. I thought, isn't that great? Because I want to do stuff with Tyson Fury. Yeah. And you guys are discussing Mike Tyson. So it's all going in a good direction now.
So Richard, where do you feel that we're at and our movement's going forward?
No, I think everything is at where it needs to be. And I just want to say, like, I call it being constructively critical. I just want, as the example we've given, that guy that got through has been inspired to at least do the best he can be. And that's the whole trick, that's why I always said it's the individual, it's a battle within yourself. As soon as you compare yourself with somebody else, you're going to be better than, so you get a bit of an ego, or you're less than and you get a little self-doubt and everything. And I think this is why I keep talking about mediocrity. It just inspires people. No, don't accept that you're good enough, because I think that means it kind of stops for you. Always accept that there's some way you can improve in some area. And I would say, when I look at what Bob's doing with all the research and the books and readings, I think we're both doing that. We're not settling with mediocrity. How can we get better? How can we learn something new? And that's all my message is. I don't think it helps for me to look at a student and only say, yeah, you're great, great, great. I don't like people teaching me that way. Yeah, okay, all of that. Tell me what I'm doing that I can improve on. And that's why I call it constructive criticism. That's all I would say. I think we're in a phenomenal place. I mean, with all the work you've been doing with the people that are tuning into the Zoom meetings when there's nowhere to go, that shows they're still so hungry. So if we can provide like a knowledge bank to help, satisfy that hunger, that's a good thing. But again, you've heard me say a million times, excellence is unattainable, the journey toward it is not. And we've all heard the old cliche, it is always about the journey. And I'd finish off with a quote I always say about Buckminster Fuller, why goals are never quite as satisfying as you think they'll be. Oh, I get the second degree, I'll be happy, I've achieved everything. You get the second degree. oh wow, maybe if I get this third degree. And there's a reason for that. He says it's goal setting and everything, and life is about bodies in motion. You're supposed to get to a goal and then be catapulted to another goal, because he used to say that anything that stops still long enough is probably dead.
Yeah.
A branch, an animal, a tree, a person. So our job is to continually, how can we improve? And it might be that much, and it doesn't matter how compared to the next person. Can you improve? And if you can, why wouldn't you? And as martial artists, I think that's our obligation.
I want to say that both of you gentlemen embody that concept, because we can see that you've never stopped, and it's one of the chief's big driving forces that a lot of people don't understand of why he's not always around the system at all times, because he's constantly trying to grow and research and look.
No matter how you feel at second dan, third dan, fourth dan, fifth dan, sixth dan, seventh dan, eighth dan, ninth dan, life begins at 10th dan. When I get my 10th dan, it's going to happen soon because the years are up. I just got to find. I'm waiting for a signal. I was hoping he'd be a signal, but I'm looking for all different ways of getting a signal to myself. When I get 10th dan, the world's going to explode.
Yep.
I've got some ideas that's just going to go nuts. So everybody get that attitude, please.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. Do you see what I'm saying? You would think 10th degree, that's the end journey. You think of martial artists, you're the grandmaster and this and that. And what Bob's saying is, wait till I get to 10th. Now I'm really going to take off. but that's exactly the message, That's those shifting goals, and I think that's fantastic. That's what it's all about. I think the style's in a wonderful place. As long as even if you've got a handful of passionate people, and I just implore those passionate people, don't let up on getting the best out of your students. That's all. That's your job, is to make them far better than they can ever get by themselves. And however we choose to motivate, and I know guys like yourself bring Dave Kovars and Farabors and all these people out to try and improve that knowledge set. I think that's fantastic. In other words, nobody's just resting on their laurels.
No.
It's great.
Well, happy 50th anniversary for Zen Do Kai, and for everything you've created. I know it's not one of the biggest milestones in your martial arts journey, but for everyone that followed you, it
our
is.
journey's 55 years.
Yeah.
What we're celebrating is Zen Do Kai.
Yes.
Which is just, so I'd just like to finish myself personally with thanking every 9th dan, every 8th dan, every 7th dan that's currently still training today, and every other black belt. But particularly Billy Monet. To have a friend like Billy Monet for 55 years is absolute, he's 50 years because he joined, so we started 65,
Yeah.
Billy started in 70, 71, he's 5 or 6 years behind us, but he's still 50, 60 years.
Yeah, it's a long time.
We've all been friends.
Yeah.
You're saying Billy's old, like us.
No, everyone's younger than me.
Yeah.
I've got a club called the Octagonarian Club. Octagonarian Club. But you've got to be 80 to be in it, so I'm the only one in it at the moment. He's on his way, he'll be there shortly.
Shortly?
All right.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.